And early on, we told you about the work that is being done by the Public Interest and Accountability Committee, PIAC. And since 2011, they've been publishing all these reports. Usually, this is how they do it. They have two reports, a half-year one, and then they have a full report for the year. And for 2018, I remember I had read the 2017 one, just a half year of 2018. Now they have a full report of the 2018 one. And sometimes the key findings and some of the things that have been put together in that report, if you have some great knowledge about it, you will be astounded about how we tend to use proceeds from our oil revenues as to what sort of expenditures they are supposed to be, whether we're monitoring how those expenditures have been done, and the projects in themselves, have they been well executed? And well, we made some commitment. We wanted to put certain percentages or expend certain percentages of certain allocations in such a way. But have we been able to do that? Are we doing too much or doing less, investing less in certain areas to make sure that we bring it all together as a country and say that we're making some positives and gaining from oil and the revenue? So we decided to invite PIAC and its representative right here in the studio. And Nana Ejenim Boateng is with the Ghana Chamber of Commerce. He's representing the chamber on the Public Interest and Accountability Committee, and of course with the Ghana Chamber of Commerce. It also means that he's also with the Association of Ghana Industries. He's right here. Nana Ejenim Boateng, good morning and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, my brother. How you doing?
Nice. And the last time there was a forum that was convened in Kumasi, and some of the key findings, especially some of those interactions you tried to have with the communities relatedly that had been cited in the report vis-a-vis the project that had been done, etc. Will keep many people baffled. But for our first question, what were some of the keynotes, especially coming from what the processes of observations and auditing that had been done for the 2018 period?
Well, thank you very much, and good morning to your listeners and viewers as well. Some of the key findings that PIAC found out that we found out that a lot of monies went into the free SHS, and as such, we're very much interested in knowing whether those monies were used very well in that sector. And with our visit to most of the senior high schools, we realized that to a very large extent, you know, the schools, looking at 2018, 2017, they had some challenges. 2017, they had some challenges in delayance in receiving their monies. But in 2018, most of the schools that we visited said their monies came in early, provisions came in early, and the other challenge was the quantity of food that some of the suppliers were supplying them. Now most of the schools have the scales, so they weigh the rice and maize when the suppliers do supply them. And then also the quality of food has improved. A few challenges that we found out was some of the suppliers were not supplying the right quantities of food, and we found most of the schools to complain that supplies were coming without advice. That was a challenge for them, because they think that, look, if you are supplying us food, apart from the way bills that come in, we should get an invoice that advises us on other details of the supplies.
Yeah, yes. And logically, we know that we have set out certain regulations in, as to how we need to spend and where the allocations need to go, whether it's for ABFA and for all that. Have we been observing what we have put in law?
Yes, we are observing it, but you know, we slipped regards to some of them. The law requires that we use 70% of our revenues on capital expenditure, but you find out that we are slipping. You know, when we budget to that effect, but when it comes to the actuals, we are not able to make it up regards to the actuals. When you look at 2018, we did 49% of capital expenditure and 51%.
Even though we're supposed to have done 70%.
Yes, according to the law.
And so we do the appropriation, but it's how to do the expenditure or the disbursement as supposed to be.
Yes, please.
But that raises certain concerns that the institutions that are supposed to do that, the Ministry of Finance at the forefront of many of these ones, then it's flouting our own regulations.
Well, yes, you can say that. You can say that. And these are some of the issues that PIAC we have raised, that we need to take a second look at them and ensure that, we don't have such slips.
Well, there was a forum that was organized in Kumasi, and it's also correlatedly with the representatives of the various districts and metropolitan as well as municipal assemblies to get to know the project that had been mentioned in the report, so to speak, in certain areas in which we had the presiding municipal or the MMDCs, and many of them who also apparently had raised certain concerns about even some of them not seeing the projects at all, even though they've been mentioned or had been allocated. Let's watch this and then we'll be back.
The public forum brought together many from different spheres of economic lives in the Sokomampong Municipal Assembly. The Public Interest and Accountability Committee's public engagement is an initiative to get Ghanaians well informed about how their oil money is used and also solicit input on how to invest the funds. Participants at the forum were disappointed at reports of either non-existent or shortly executed oil-funded projects in the face of serious infrastructure deficits.
It's mind-boggling. For example, we made mention of one school in one of the northern regions, Bagabaga Senior High School, to be precise, that a generator was purchased at 4 million Ghana cedis. And I asked myself, how much is even the Akosobu Dam? How much did it cost Ghanaians? A generator, which was not even in good shape. It's not working. 4 million Ghana cedis.
It happened that my area was captured, that a road was constructed in my area 2014. But we are very much aware that in 2014 there wasn't any road that was constructed in my electoral area. So I found it mind-boggling that perhaps we will have to seek redress in court, possibly. Ghana cannot develop without us being honest to ourselves.
Dealing with it, people must be prosecuted.
If we had something like PIAC at Obuasi or Takwa or areas where we've been extracting gold for many, many years, I think there would have been pressure on those who are extracting the gold or minerals to build roads, to build infrastructure, to build fence.
Vice Chairman of the committee, Dr. Thomas Kojo Stevens, tells Law Business attention must be given to legacy projects.
There have been a lot of times when it's been outright shoddy work. So it's very, very important that in terms of the infrastructure project, it's all money that's being used for these projects. That in terms of value for money, we get value for money. And like has been raised in virtually all the regions that we've gone to, it's important that the government focuses on some legacy projects, big projects that years after we can all look back and know that we use oil money for. Yes, some people have pointed to free stages, but I'm talking, so free stages is investment in human capital, but I'm also talking about infrastructure.
The forum, which is expected to be continued across other parts of the country, is meant to ensure the proper utilization of the oil revenues. Prince Apia reporting.
And we still have in the studio helping us again take a look at what the PIAC report contents are and how perhaps we can also, well, going forward, improve the state of expenditure, the allocation, especially our proceeds from our oil revenues. And Nana Ijeni Boateng is here with us. He's with the Ghana Chamber of Commerce. He's representing them on the committee, the Public Interest and Accountability Committee. But if you get to listen to what they were raising, it raises concerns about proper fiscal governance and oversight on disbursement or after appropriation, and then whether the projects have been well monitored, so to speak, after those allocations have been made.
Yes, to some extent, we can do better with monitoring of the projects because we realize with our engagements in the district, when you get to the district, most of the district do not even know that a particular project is being funded with oil revenues. So what PIAC is advising that going forward, you know, when projects are being allocated to the district and DCEs and other relevant agencies should be informed about the projects so that, you know, they can do proper monitoring. So if the contractor or whoever has been given that project is not working according to the contract, they can raise concerns before PIAC gets to the place. Maybe after a year or so, then you realize that the project wasn't executed according to plan.
We know that prior to setting up of the whole regulation as to how we tend to spend and how the allocations are supposed to go, it was done on properly structured, well best practices.
Yes.
It could be from Norway, etc.
Yes,
right?
yes.
What are they doing right? Have they been doing right that then we are not doing, even though we replicated the sort of regulations that they had in terms of
Well, with regards to that, I would say, you know, comparing ourselves to Norway is way up there, and we are now starting. You know, even when Norway discovered oil, they took their time to even, you know, put in all the necessary legislation, and apart from that, raise the necessary monies that will help them to explore their own oil. But our case is not so. We, you know, we have to bring in IOCs, you know, to come and assist us, you know, to explore our oil. So I believe that once we are learning from them, we can do better. We are not there yet, but we can do better. And I think that looking at what we really need to do, we need to really ensure that legacy projects are done so that we can point to, you know, as today everybody can point to Akosombo Dam after independence, that look, this is what we have. It's a legacy that was left for us.
Explain that for me. If you say legacy project, means that projects that needs to be continued after a transition.
Yes.
Or a project that is a representative of having been structured and built using oil money. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, structured and built using oil money, and at the same time transits generations. You know, this is what we're talking about when we say legacy project. So when, like, you construct a railway, like PIAC has been saying, we construct railway across the country. You know, we can say, and future generations can say that, look, our oil revenue, you know, this is one of the benefits of our oil revenue. And in one of our engagements in Asokware Mampong, somebody came up and said, look, why don't you, instead of spreading the oil revenues very thinly, why don't you look for one project and say maybe this year, 2019, all oil revenues are going to be used to construct routes, or all oil revenues are going to be used to construct railways. You understand? So that we can have massive impacts in a particular sector than to spread the revenues thinly.
I remember in your report, and when I was going through, there was a particular line, because the revenues were almost capped, or closer to 1 billion Ghana cedis. We said 1 billion Ghana cedis. We said we could have built
3
interchanges.
No, 3 terminal 3.
Okay, 3 terminal 3
airports.
Okay, like the way we see in Kutuka International.
Yeah, we see in Kutuka International.
Look at the cost.
Yes.
And then, but it would also speak volume about how much we tend to make, and that would be 997 million we made last year.
Yes.
USD.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And usually, if we want to spend such an amount, is there any point in time where there needs to be some recourse to the committee or what the regulations are, and if they're flouted, who gets the blame and who has to be held responsible?
For us, our mandate, we have 3 mandates. PIAC's mandate is to monitor and evaluate with compliance with the law by government and other relevant agencies.
And now the government, I mean, so to speak, it's not necessarily an MPP or but we've had NDC and MPP government all flouting the regulations.
Yes. But once we raise the regulations, there's been instances whereby some of our recommendations have been implemented by government. So we are making headway. Okay.
We'll come to the various sections and subsectors for investment, and then we'll get to see where we should have been investing more and why. Because if you take a look at the Auditor General's report, it speaks volumes about how we inflate costs, either through over invoicing or however means we tend to do that. And sometimes projects have been recorded or allocated or said to have been done. Monies have been spent, but you can't find the projects on the ground. And the report indicates that those are some of the indications you found. Is that true?
Yes.
Is that a worry for you? Which were some of the areas that you found to be having more of these? So to speak?
You know, in the northern part of the country, we found out that certain roads that were supposed to be in certain particular communities were not there. You understand, the roads have been allocated to other communities, and this means that that particular community will be deprived of road because it's assumed that they've been given road already in our budget. Also, we found out that certain dams that were supposed to be constructed were not there. And for instance, there was a particular school that there was this transformer that was supposed to be installed. Gambaga. You know, and the transformer was sitting idle under the mercy of the weather, which wasn't the best of things.
If it's a transformer, you mean a generator, so to speak?
No, not a generator. A transformer itself. And
it was not being used?
It wasn't being used. You know, because the contractor needs to, you know, fix it, install it. Let me put it this way. The contractor needs to install, and it hasn't been installed, and it's just sitting there.
Wasting?
Wasting, that exactly so.
So how do we then, after doing the monitoring, evaluating, bringing out the report, tend to follow up with the recommendations?
We do follow up with the recommendations, and in recent times we are trying to collaborate with the other accountability agencies to ensure that where there is for those accountability institutions to investigate, then they can pick it up from there. And one of those institutions are YOCO. We've signed a memorandum of understanding with the YOCO. We are talking to the Auditor General as well, so that some of these things can be trashed out at those levels.
When it comes to the fund utilization, we have $977 million made. Now, you have an allocation. For example, the ABFL allocation, when it comes to expenditure for on education, we spend 98% of the allocation on education on free SHS.
Yes.
That's to the detriment, or the detriment of the other sectors of the same sector.
That is very debatable, and that is why PIAC is putting some of this information out there. It's for us, the citizenry, to debate and advise or accept whether we want to develop the human capital of this nation or we want to do otherwise.
What's your own personal view? Because you're an entrepreneur, you employ people.
Yes.
And it's important that we train people as well.
Yes.
But just, well, funding school fees, teaching and other materials for second cycle schooling is not the only aspect of activity in the educational subsector that should be done.
Okay. With my personal view, for me, free SHS is one of the good things that have happened to this nation. But the issue that we need to look at is the sustainability of free SHS, because oil revenues are volatile. So looking at the volatility of the petroleum sector, if we put all our hope on those revenues. We don't know going into the future if we can sustain the free SHS. But the free SHS, in principle, it's a very good thing that has happened to this nation, and we need to encourage it. But we need to look for other sources of funding.
But it is true.
Yes.
For the educational subsector,
yes,
there are areas also that tend to need help. And ideally, if we're structuring the allocations very well of what the proceeds will be from oil for each year, we could have also spent on some other areas within the educational subsector.
Well, that is true. But fortunately for us, we still have the GET fund, which can also augment the work that oil revenue is doing for the educational sector. So I think that once we are in one breath, we are saying that we don't have to rely so much on oil revenues to sustain free SH. We need to look for other sources of revenue to sustain it. Currently, if we have the oil and there are other sources of revenue that can support the sector, why not?
It looks like the concerns that have been raised, I mean, prior to putting together all these regulations we have as to how we need to spend the revenues, there seem to be some manifestation of those concerns or those criticisms out there, especially same percentage utilization for agriculture spent on planting for food and jobs. The report indicates that.
Yes.
Now, we're supposed to be doing well in agriculture. The numbers have been better. But if we want to get to the level at which we could have some commensurate performance of the sector vis-a-vis what we're getting from the oil and gas subsector, it would also mean that the investment need to be just beyond planting for food and jobs, just artisanal farming.
Exactly, exactly. Now, one of the challenges with farming that, since myself I've ventured into farming before, one of the challenges of farming is post-harvest losses. You see, and we were in Ashanti region and we found out that government has renovated and constructed certain warehouses, you know, which is being used by NAFAC and the Commodity Exchange are all using those warehouses. And I think it will help. If we have such warehouses that can store the produce for us, because in one of such warehouses, realize that the warehouse has a laboratory to even test the moisture level of maize, and it has a small plant there that sees to processing the maize in a way to, you know, increase its lifespan. So to ensure that there are no weevils, moisture levels, and other things are okay. And these are some of the things that we have to do. But that notwithstanding, I think we need to mechanize our agri sector more. The other challenge is, you know, your attempt to, a businessman wants to invest into farming. And I experienced in just a Greater Accra region around a Suchari area some years ago. You realize that you yourself, you need a dozer, an earth moving equipment to clear the land for you. To clear the land for you. And I remember those days to rent a low loader from Accra and put a dozer on it and drive all the way to a Suchari. It was so expensive that you realize that it becomes the cost, the initial cost of investing in agriculture becomes so high for the private sector. You see, and so what I would say is we need to encourage government that some of the revenues in the agri sector should look at mechanization or providing equipments for the district so that they can support everyone who wants to go into farming.
Does it mean we're supposed to have other complementary initiatives as part of government policy that will provide some of these aligned services so that these allocations from our oil revenues will then go and tackle what they have to do? It doesn't mean that those ones are not being effective, because we're supposed to have dams being built, we're supposed to have irrigation facilities being tractors being provided, roads being constructed at the same time. So then they all come together in one synergy. And it looks like we're having some investments being expended more or being pumped more into others, and then also leaving some other sectors which do not complement each other?
You know, the law entreats us to, you know, every 3 years select 4 priority areas for government to invest in. And we have selected road and rail infrastructure, we've selected agriculture, we selected education and services in education, so have we selected health and services in health. So with all these priority areas which we've selected, at least we've invested in some of the areas. We've invested in some of the areas, and it happens that education had a chunk of the money. It is good. Like my vice chairman said, Dr. Stevens said, you know, somebody will argue it's also developing the human capital of the nation. And I remember in Kumasi, the regional minister, you know, advocated for that passionately, because he said that if it wasn't for a loan, he couldn't have gone to secondary school to become who he is today. And also, when you go out there, you realize that the free education has really helped people.
It's caught on.
It caught on. And even in recent times, I remember one interview that one of your stations conducted when the BEC students were going to write their BEC. When they were interviewed after that, most of them were so enthused. Most of them were so enthused that, yes, so free SHS, yes, you be Kobe. You understand? So you realize that they are even motivated now to even do their best to also attend the free SHS, because then that tells me that in the past, people even had the notion that even in our dialect, me pass a cry, me you be in Tiama into me near day. Mammy Hame Crank. But today, that young girl, that young boy has the hope that if I should do my best and pass, definitely, even if my parents don't have the resources, I can also attend senior high secondary school.
But then that speaks volumes about how the program is doing among the perceptive levels, among the parents and especially the communities and the beneficiary children or students.
Yes.
Then at what point then do we need to look at what the recommendations have always been, as being the criticism that we need to make sure we do means testing to get to see those who can't afford, and really the allocations will go to them, and those who can somewhat afford, they're giving some bursary, and those who can afford, of course, they just get as little as they could because there's affordability. Like for somebody like you, I'm sure your children could afford, so to speak.
Yeah, by God's grace.
Yeah, but there are countless thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of parents who can't afford secondary schooling and the cost of education at that level.
I think our Honorable Minister Ken Ofori-Atta initiated that debate, and I think it's a healthy one that we need to debate that as Ghanaians and find a way whereby if those who can afford to pay should pay, and those who can't afford should be supported. But it's for us, the citizenry, to, you know, engage ourselves in that debate and find the best way to approach the funding issue.
Okay, so now we have this. It says that in the 2018 financial year, only 49% of the utilized ABFA was used for capital expenditure. Less than 70% stipulated in the PRMA, okay? And now 51% was utilized for the supply of goods and services. That's a lopsided way to expend money.
Sure. According to the PRMA, you know, we are supposed to use 70% for capital expenditure, but we weren't able to meet that, and we've seen that over the years we've had those challenges, and I think free SHS has come to add up to those challenges. So we have to find a way to create the balance. You know, though as I said initially, some have argued that free SHS is also a capital expenditure, developing the human capital. So if you should look at it from that angle and not just look at capital expenditure in that it's small contest, then we are not doing bad. That's what
We'll go to page 14 of the report. We'll go to page 14 of the report very soon.
Okay.
But I know that Setekwe started what they call the Ghana Investments Fund.
Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund. Yes.
And it looks like the allocations that are supposed to be going in there for the period under review have not been.
Yes. In 2018.
And you are an entrepreneur.
Yes.
You should be interested in that.
Sure. Because if infrastructure work is going on, definitely the private sector will get jobs to do. There'll be allocation of contracts, supplies here and there, and we will be the beneficiaries of it. So I'm very much interested, and going forward, I would love to see government, the Ministry of Finance, allocating some revenues to that particular sector, because that the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund is a special vehicle that was initiated to, come up with huge projects, just like the Kotka International Airport Terminal 3. Those are one of the success stories that we can talk about.
Okay, so we said page 14, but if we go down to page 13, we want to show you what the utilization is, page 13, and you go to column 2. That'll be column 2. You go to 19. That'll be 19. Okay. So let's wait here. It says allocation 19, an amount of 827 million Ghana cedis. Of course, we have the ABF's own allocation of 1 billion was utilized, leaving 251 unutilized at the end of 2018. When added to the 2017 and spent ABFA, it's plused or summed up to 403. It was unspent as at the close of the financial year 2018 December. So how do you look at this? How the report doesn't give us an insight into where this amount is? Because it's not being spent.
Yeah, it's not being spent, but according to we've engaged the Ministry of Finance on this amount, and this trend tends to be happening year on, and we think it's not the best. Because
so if it's not spent, where is it? They're spending on some other activity?
No, the Ministry of Finance, when we engaged the Ministry of Finance, they said it hasn't been spent. They are going to bring it forward in the next budget for us to spend it in our next budget. That was the explanation.
So where is it? Is it there? Is it sitting somewhere?
This is what we are told, that it's sitting in one of the accounts.
So we had 2017 not spent, and 2018 also. Some amounts also not spent.
Yes.
And summing up to about 403 million.
It's a total sum up to about 650.
Yes, subsequently when you add.
Yes. And 2017 was 403 million, and 2018 was 251 million.
So you have 655.
Yes, please. Yes.
And it's sitting where? So it will be brought forward to 2019.
To 2019 in our next budget. 2019 budget has been read already.
Yeah, but we'll do a review.
We'll do a review maybe September or thereabout. Not too sure.
No, we're supposed to be having a review from now to. So by close of July we should see a review.
Okay.
Usually that's the practice. Because by November we should have a new budget being ready.
Yes, but I can't say if it will be in the review.
But you said you had an engagement with the Ministry of Finance. They should give you some pointers as to how they intend bringing that forward, whether the promise is there, and because we've had a practice in which central government tends to reallocate funding to some other projects.
Yes, these are some of the things that we have to pay attention to.
Because it's been indicated in the report.
Yes, because you realize that it didn't happen only in 2017 and 2018. You realize that 2016, it did
2015, and even 2014.
You see, so it keeps on repeating itself. So it tells me that then the Ministry of Finance need to pay more attention to revenues allocation and their utilization, so that to ensure that revenues that are allocated are utilized for and accounted for accordingly.
Okay. Now let's take you to again page 13 and column 220. Now when you get there, 20, this one, so let's go up. It says out of the amount utilized, these are the allocations. We spent from the ABFA, 419 was spent on education, and we also had only 15.3 from of the ABFA spent on agriculture. That's low.
That's low.
We said we're having an extractive sector, and the reason for which we had the regulation, and I remember vividly when the national debates were ongoing, it was on radio, TV, and everywhere, even the parliamentarians were all debating. Civil society contributed significantly to this, was that we wanted to have a reversal of the black gold cares or the oil cares, and for which we also need to make sure we complementarily invest in agriculture to shore up the differences.
Surely. As it stands now, Ghana is fortunate that we are using less than 10% of our total, using 10% of our oil revenue to support ABFA. So it means that other sectors are not being neglected. But that also doesn't mean that we can't do better for other sectors. So we are not doing bad at all. Recently, I was at the European University, the School of Public Policy, and undergoing a program there. And most of the lecturers that taught us there were international lecturers, and they think they were proud of how Ghana was using its revenue and acknowledge PIAC for its role in ensuring that. That is to say that we are not over-relying on petroleum revenues to support our budget, and that's exactly so.
Now we want to wind down to the recommendations, but before we do that, there's been, it's not salient, very loud concern raised by you as PIAC about government interference in GNPC in the way they tend to expend.
Yes, we think that in our recommendation, political interference in GNPC can lead to financing of quasi fiscal expenditures, which won't be the prudent thing to do when it comes to corporate governance. And it can also lead to GNPC losing focus of its core mandate. So we will think that Parliament will have to find a way to minimize those interference, and more so when you look at GNPC's effort in augmenting government infrastructure and support for communities. We thought that GNPC is doing well in its CSI, that's corporate social investment.
And we'll go to the recommendations, because in that recommendation, you like the efforts of the foundation in investing in the corporate social responsibility front, but you're also worried that there needs to be some cap, especially if you look at V.
Yes.
Where there needs to be that, there could be some excessive expenditure in that category.
Sure. You know,
why those fears?
I would say those fears are legitimate fears because if you don't control certain things, and fortunately for us, we have the earmarking funding cap act, which can, cap the amount of money that GNPC uses for CSI, because we still don't want them to lose focus on their core mandate, so that they would know that, look, we cannot take more than this into CSI, because if we don't do that,
because currently that's what's happening.
Yes, because if we...
they are inaugurating buildings here and there, infrastructure here and there, whilst we also know that there are allocations that have been made into the FBFA, the ABFA, etc. And all these are all proceeds from oil, for which GNPC is an instrumental entity representing Ghana in that front. So it's like we're duplicating efforts.
Well, you know that there are certain frontline communities that are directly affected by oil exploration. So GNPC is supporting most of those communities. And at the same time, you know that Ghana has onshore oil, which GNPC is working on to see how best we can explore those facilities. And it's investing in those areas as well, which is a good thing for them to do, you know. But we have to still control it so that they don't go so much into it or exceed a certain responsibility that they need to live up to, because to see every organization has a corporate social responsibility that it needs to pursue, but it needs to be guided so that it doesn't go into much into those areas.
But we haven't got into the alarming rate yet.
We've not got into the alarming rate yet.
In all the interactions you've had going around the communities, because we've had representative of the Ghana General Association also on the committee.
Yes.
You as a chamber, the Ghana Chamber of Commerce
and
also
Industry.
represented,
Yes.
and other bodies as well.
Yes.
Which is some of the most outstanding findings? And sometimes you go to the communities, you go and verify, you realize that that's true. That baffles you about the sort of expenditure that has led to misappropriation, etc., and non-accountability.
You know, like some of the expenditures, you go, like we were in Ashanti region in the Obuasi area, and there was a particular road that was made mention of, and the people said, we say they are said that contractor.
Okay, so you're saying that it was mentioned in the national budget?
No, we told the people, you know, when we are going on some of these district engagements, we pick projects that have been executed because we go to inspect some of those projects. So when we mentioned that, oh, this road has been fixed in your district, then the people all just got agitated that, look, this road, it got spoiled long ago.
And hasn't been fixed?
It hasn't. It has been fixed. It was fixed at a point in time, but within a short.
So it means that when that was done was shoddy? Sure.
That's what the people were talking about. And these are some of the challenges that we see on the field. And like, for instance, there was one of the schools that we visited, and we realized that the construction of the classroom unit being funded by GNPC, the lumber being used for the roofing wasn't the best of lumbers that was being used, and we were questioning the guys at the site, and the district guys, the district engineer there was worried because he didn't know much about the project, so that he can monitor the project and ensure that the right thing is being done. But that said, GNPC, it has its technical team that goes around monitoring some of these projects. So I believe that they will be picking some of these things along the line, because we are told that they visit the sites regularly and monitor some of this things.
I know that this one is not within the law, but because I knew that I was coming to have this engagement, I had some interaction with and some auditing friends of mine who liked the value for money audit, the risk audit, and all that. And they were saying that even though it's not been stipulated, at the time of the execution of the project, perhaps PIAC needs to have more eyes within the monitoring processes of the project execution, so that you don't tend to come back later and be pointing out in various communities when you have the engagement, and you get to find out apparently, even though this has been stated in Accra to be fine, everything in the communities is not there. What do you think of it? Is it possible?
The law
doesn't state that.
Doesn't state that, as you said. But what we have realized is the challenge that is costing us so much is cost overruns. Because when I say cost overruns, you know, contracts are awarded, and then you know that a certain amount of money that you are earmarking for that contract today, it will not take the contractor very far. So it will end up that some work will be done today, then the project will lie down so much, assuming a road, the first phase has been done, the second phase needs to be done, and it lies down for over a year. By the time the contractor comes back, the road has deteriorated. So then you have to put in more money to fix the first phase and then get into the second phase. So at the end of the day, you realize that the amount of money that was budgeted for the project.
So you tend to have overruns.
Overruns, cost overruns. That's the challenge.
Well,
then if the government, we can look at that as a people, I think that it will help. And it can also reduce the cost of some of this project. Because as an entrepreneur, if I secure a contract and I know that this contract, I'll be paid within a certain period of time, and even the contract sum is low, I am more than willing to execute the contract quickly. Then I can get my money and get my hands off it, because I know that if government is not going to pay me early, the cost of borrowing and everything is going to go up, so that I'm going to lose out on it. So then the contract needs to be padded up, and these are some of the challenges which we have to look as a people.
Well, I'll ask you a last question. We've been speaking to Nana Ejenim Boateng. He's with the Ghana Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Right. You currently head Greater Accra?
Yeah, Greater Accra. I'm the Greater Accra acting chairman.
Acting chairman. That's a big position. And, well, he's representing the chamber on the Public Interest and Accountability Committee. And we'll end the conversation here, but not without a last question. When you went round, what would you point out to be a legacy a project in the community today that you can say that, look, after having this from 2011 to now, this is the legacy project we have? Just one.
Just one.
Not the transformer that's lying out.
Yes. What?
Or free SHS.
Yes, free SHS. Free SHS for me
is the ideal one.
Is the ideal one.
We can bear testimony to it.
Yes. Looking at the impact of the free SHS.
Human capital development.
Yes, notwithstanding all its teaching challenges.
Yeah. Well, producing and inching up social capital is good as well.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Nana Ejenim Boateng is the acting chairman for the Ghana Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Greater Accra, but he's representing the national body on the Public Interest and Accountability Committee, PIAC. Look, you have to visit their website, the PIAC website, PIAC, and you get to know the reports generated, compiled since 2011. This is how they tend to do it. Each year, they have 2 reports. One for the previous year, which will be a full report, and then the half-year report. And then subsequently, at the end of the financial year, they do a production of a whole year's report. So we all will tend to do the interaction, make the inferences, reference those ones as well when we're making the comments and the debate, wherever we find ourselves.